Where was the California Emigrant Trail located as it passed through the Reno, Sparks, Nevada area? This is a question I was asking myself many years ago, and I found that historians were mostly in agreement as to the route. Notice I said mostly in agreement. This video will be a continuation of where these folks went after they came off the horrific events of their passage through the 40-mile desert here in Nevada. So let's take a look at some actual locations here in the Reno area that should give you a handle on what it was like to travel through these Truckee Meadows on foot in the mid-19th century. Before we dive into this episode, I'd like to make an appeal to you to help me build and grow this channel. I'd like to encourage you to please click that little subscribe button. And by doing so and building this channel and growing this channel, I will hopefully be able to get the credibility to get into places that I ordinarily wouldn't be able to get into, and hopefully get access to people that I ordinarily wouldn't have access to. All this means better content for you. Thank you. The immigrants that we're talking about were those traveling on foot with livestock and wagons on their way to California from the 1840s to the 1860s. After the Stevens-Townsend-Murphy Party of 1844 were the first to show that wagons could in fact be taken over the Sierra Nevada mountains, they were followed by others looking for new lives in the future Golden State, including the ill-fated Donner Party of 1846 to 47. Then came the gold rushers who left family, friends, careers, and farms behind to make their fortune in the Sierra foothills. Others continued to use this trail after the gold rush, which continued to be used actively until the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, which also came right through the future Reno Sparks area. The trail was still used after the coming of the railroad because not everyone could afford to move themselves and all of their stuff out west on the train. This is St. Joseph, Missouri, where the immigrants would get their start. Actually either here in St. Joseph or in Independence, Missouri. These towns were set up as supply points for the immigrants for supplies for their long journey west, and these were pretty lively towns at that point. I've always thought that it's super cool that all these people coming through, opening up the American West, came right through the area where I live. And in order to get to this area, they had to suffer the trials and tribulations of the 40-mile desert. And if you haven't seen our video on the 40-mile desert, I'll leave a link to that video in the description of this one. Near the entrance of the 40-mile desert, the Emigrant Trail split in two, and they had a choice to either take the Truckee River Route, which came down the Truckee River here through the Carson Canyon, or they could head southward on the Carson Route, which headed towards the Carson River and had them going over the Sierra Nevada mountains near present-day Highway 88 south of Minden, Nevada. Those that chose the Truckee River Route dusted themselves off from their difficult desert crossing at the Truckee River near present-day Wadsworth, Nevada. The presence of this river saved many lives. Once the people and the surviving animals recovered and were ready to continue on, they had to negotiate their way through the Truckee River Canyon, which today hosts Interstate 80 and the railroads. There were several reasons why many people chose to go the southern Carson River route, one of which was the stigma of what had happened to the Donner Party on the Truckee route. Another big reason, and perhaps the biggest, was the number of times one had to cross the rivers. In order to find a reasonable path for the wagons and animals, immigrants on the Truckee route had to cross the river up to 27 times before they finally left it near present-day Verdi, Nevada. 27 times! That was hard going with rocky river bottoms, rushing water, and protesting livestock. In contrast, those crossing the Carson River only had to do it 3 times. The construction of the railroads, the Transcontinental Railroad, and the early highways, and including modern Highway 80, have pretty much obliterated any remaining traces of the original Emigrant Trail through this canyon. There are supposed to be some original segments, but I have not found them yet. What hasn't changed much here is the topography. And although there have been some modern improvements and some industrial action going on in this canyon, for the most part, the topography is the same. The canyon walls are the same. And you can still get a feeling for what they would have seen and what it would have been like for them to come through here all those years ago. These emigrant trail markers, which are fabricated out of railroad rail material, were conceived, constructed, and installed by the Nevada Emigrant Trail Marking Committee. And these guys were concerned about emigrant trail history and it being preserved for future generations. And they installed these in the 1970s. Each marker is welded together of railroad rail, and the lower length here is 6 feet long, and 3 feet of it is embedded below ground, embedded in concrete. Each marker weighs about 200 pounds, and they originally were painted yellow so they could be seen from a distance. And it's these markers that became the source of potentially the largest disagreement between historians regarding the route the immigrants actually took. There was no official roadmap or government surveying of the route, so all we modern day folks have to go on are immigrant diaries and journals that were recorded at the time, and it's up to us to decipher and interpret them. And sometimes the descriptions of the routes can be taken in different ways by different people.
We came to the crossing of a miserable deep slough, the bank of which was nearly perpendicular. Frightful enough to us it was, I will assure you, but with our wagon box raised and our wheels locked, down we plunged. Harriet S. Ward, September 28, 1853.
The original Trail Marking Committee had the immigrants leaving the Truckee River Canyon at a place known as Jameson's Station, which was constructed in 1852 behind the location of our water treatment plant. And this was an immigrant trading post that was reportedly the first settlement here in the Truckee Meadows. But smash cut to 2024, I would like to visit that location and see the trail marker that should still be there, but my efforts have been thwarted by the Truckee Meadows Water Authority, which has denied me permission to just go back there and look and take a couple of pictures. But I have a workaround. I located the site of Jameson Station on the map and found that it's just across the river from the Truckee River bike path in Sparks. So I took my drone over there and flew it across the river and got the shots that I wanted, except for close-ups of the ruins. Also, I lucked out as I was able to locate 2 of the photos of the ruins of the station that I took back in 1997 on film, and here they are. So the controversy. Trails West is today's organization that took over for the original Emigrant Trail Marking Committee, and they're the guys and gals that maintain these markers and expand on the program. Back in the year 2000, some members of Trails West were poring over some old diaries, and they concluded that the immigrants, in order to avoid some very marshy conditions about a half a mile before the end of the Truckee River Canyon, or some other similar obstacles, they concluded that the immigrants actually left the trail and started to ascend the Virginia Range Mountains, which would ultimately come down into today's Hidden Valley. This was a mile-long hard pull up the mountains, and it brought them up 800 feet in elevation. And then they had to contend with coming down the other side into today's Hidden Valley. There was a motion to change the verbiage on a few of the markers to reflect this new information. However, some local historians and other people interested in the trail objected to any changes, and they said that the research of the original Emigrant Trail Marking Committee was solid. The disagreement ultimately ended up in the courts. A lawsuit was filed, and this was the first time in anybody's memory that a lawsuit was filed over immigrant trail history. Ultimately, a decision was handed down by the district court that certain markers would be assigned to the stewardship of Trails West, and certain others would be taken care of by a local group, Emigrant Trails West. Hey, wild horses. Don't mind me. I'm just coming to check out the Emigrant Trail. I don't have any food for you. Regardless of how they got to the Hidden Valley area, they did head south through that area and bypass the marshes. And remarkably, you can still see physical evidence of their trek through this area today. This stretch of road is the only remaining piece of original emigrant trail in the Truckee Meadows. This is the path that the emigrants took from the Hidden Valley area to the large camping area at the base of Rattlesnake Mountain, which we will visit next. This area has been fenced off since at least the early 1970s when the Immigrant Trail Marking Committee installed this marker, which is great because it hopefully keeps the wild horses out. When I first visited these ruts in 1997, it really sparked my imagination and made me want to study the history of the Immigrant Trail in more detail. That original Emigrant Road section came right out here and made a turn, heading west again. And the big old hill in the background there is Rattlesnake Mountain. And there was a large camp there because there was a spring, and almost all the immigrants stopped and camped there and refreshed and regrouped. And after that, they headed right through the direction of the Atlantis, which is the tall building in the left, if you can see it in the background. So it's pretty cool to be able to see the straight shot that they went towards the Sierra Nevada. Did you know that Reno has a Donner Party Park? Well, here it is in the shadow of Rattlesnake Mountain. And this park is located on property that used to be the old Short Ranch, and the old ranch house used to be very close to this location. Prior to modern times, the surrounding area outside of downtown Reno and Sparks just used to be filled with ranches and cattle farms and that kind of thing. And over time, those all got subdivided off like happens in most areas. In the 1970s, the Short Ranch itself was subdivided into the area now known as the Donner Springs subdivision. The immigrant marker here in this park used to be located somewhere in this vicinity, but once the Short Ranch was subdivided off, it was moved here to this location, which was supposedly very close to the location of the old spring that drew all the immigrants to this area to camp and regroup and prepare for the excursion over the Sierra Nevada mountains. I've looked all over for the evidence of the old spring. I don't see it. It must have been rerouted years ago due to progress. From the Donner Party Park area at the base of Rattlesnake Mountain, the immigrants made a beeline pretty much up what is now Peckham Lane, right past this location, which is on the property of the Reno Convention Center. And when this marker was installed in 1974, in the presence of then Governor Mike O'Callaghan, the Reno Convention Center was known as the Centennial Coliseum due to Reno being 100 years old at the time it was constructed. The old trail continued on through property where the Atlantis Casino Resort now sits, and past this point, which now sports this marker commemorating the Junction House. By 1853, this place began to take on that name due to its being at the junction of several early toll roads in the area, including those headed towards California, Virginia City, Oregon, and Washoe Valley. Also, if you go inside the Atlantis on the wall, there is a reproduction of the verbiage on the monument outside. It's just nice to see that an operation as large as this still takes the time to remember those that came before. The Trail Marking Committee never set up a marker at this location, but Washoe County did. Just look for the wagon wheel on Plumas Lane, just adjacent to the Washoe County Golf Course. The immigrants passed right by this location on land that would later become the golf course as they headed west towards the Truckee River. From the golf course, the immigrants headed west, kind of parallel to today's Plum Lane, and they went right behind the location of Roy Gom Elementary School. You can find the location where they hit the Truckee River again here at the end of Aspen Glen Drive. There's an immigrant marker here, and where they met the Truckee River was known as Stone's Crossing back in the day, and here they crossed the river. Several immigrant diaries recorded the presence of a small creek that emptied into the Truckee River right at the crossing location. And this natural water feature is still here, and today it's known as Hunter Creek. And it's pretty darn cool to be able to see something that the immigrants saw way back when, in the middle of the 19th century, on their way west. Much later, there was an iron bridge at this location which moved traffic on Mayberry Drive over the river, which predates today's modern pedestrian bridge. One day in the 1950s, a truck that was loaded way over the weight limit of the bridge tried to cross, and the bridge collapsed. I detailed that story on my Dog Walks episode. I'll leave a link to that video in the description of this one below. All right, I hope you enjoyed our time today, and I hope you learned something new and unique about our area in which we live. And today we're finishing up our episode at Bully's. Bully's Sports Bar and Grill here in Northwest Reno. Bully's is a small local chain, and I don't get to Bully's that often because it's very sports oriented, and I don't really follow professional sports at all, but a lot of people do, and these places do very well. And I'm so glad today to have an IPA in my hand because did it look hot while I was filming this? I filmed this over 2 days, and both days my car thermometer measured 106. We're in the middle of this heat wave that is supposed to last all week. And don't worry, I drank plenty of water. I'm not hydrating with beer today. This is a Revision IPA, a West Coast IPA from Revision, based here in Reno, Sparks. And Revision was also founded by the same dude that founded Knee Deep Brewing, if you've heard of them. So check out some Revision. They got a great facility over on Rock Boulevard. That is all I have for you today. Please subscribe and click that little like button if you'd be so kind. And as Harold S. Smith Sr. of Harold's Club always said, I'm with you. Cheers. The rail pieces were welded together, and this lower piece is 6 feet long, and 3 feet of it is below ground, embedded in concrete. Each of these markers weighs about 200 pounds, and here come the bees. Uh-oh. All right, I'm gonna call it good.